It is.
Well, not the last game.
No, that's not the last game. That's the last of the regular season game.
We'll see you after.
Give me the schedule.
We appreciate you.
I'm
Thanks
excited.
for listening.
Thank you for believing.
Go
Go
Lions.
Lions.
Go Lions. I'm believing. I'm believing that we're going to finally see the full schedule.
I was really nervous. That was bad.
Yeah, no, I think it was.
Okay.
Good.
I think you were good. I think I was
Oh,
bad.
man,
I
let's
know
get
I was
into
good.
it.
I think you did okay too.
That's nice of you to say.
Yeah.
Maybe that was all over my head, that video. I don't know. Welcome back, sports fans. Thank you for returning for another video. I am your host, Johnny Gaz, and happy schedule release day. The NFL has officially released its 2024 schedule, so today we're going to go through the Detroit Lions slate of games in detail, and I am going to make my very early and premature record predictions for 2024. We'll look at the home and away games, spotlight all of the primetime games the Lions have been given this year, and highlight some of those important matchups in 2024. Let's get into it. Before we dive into the schedule, make sure to hit that like button if you dig the vibe here at Johnny Gas Sports. Hit the subscription button and notify bell so you don't miss any future videos on the channel. I want to say thank you guys so much for the recent support on the videos. Talking Lions football is a passion of mine, and I love it so much to see you guys turn out on these recent videos. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers. We also have a membership option available if you want to become a part of Johnny Gas Sports. Definitely want to see you guys get involved. We're going to have a lot of fun coming up here. Exclusive content, especially as we get towards the meat of the season. I cannot wait to see what the future holds for Johnny Gas Sports. Again, thank you guys for your time. Let's get into today's topic. With it being schedule release day, we now know exactly when and where and how the Lions will play the scheduled opponents that we knew they would have slated for the 2024 season. So let's get into it. The way I'm going to do this here is I'm going to kind of go week by week. We'll break down the schedule. I'll give my very early win-loss predictions. We'll kind of do it in quarter sections of the season, kind of in 4-game quarter sections. Obviously, we have 18 weeks to dive into. This won't account major factors such as injuries. We have the entire offseason, truly to go through until we get to the meat and bones of the actual schedule itself. So a lot of things are going to change. This is very early on predictions and won't factor in those things. Again, we'll highlight the biggest matchups and talk about why they may really factor into the playoff race and the overall picture for 2024. We'll look at those primetime games, the games that will, again, really factor into the big picture. The Lions actually have 9 nationally televised games factored into their schedule this year. That is incredible. Again, we can probably make the argument that they are now officially and truly America's team. That's been building from 2022, the end of the season, that Packer game, all the way through last year, and now has culminated in 9 nationally televised games in 2024. They have a very early week 5 bye, which I do not like to see that. I think most people would tell you a mid-season or later season bye is more beneficial as far as injuries go and resetting yourself for the season. It is what it is. It's a week 5 early bye, and we'll get into that in detail as we work through this schedule. Lions also have a segment of time of 3 games in 12 days from November 24th through December 5th. They do have a little break after that, but it is a very tough grouping of games there surrounding the holiday, the Turkey Day game, and again, we'll go through that in more detail. So let's dive into the schedule. Let's go through the win-loss record. Let's see where we end up at the end of the 2024. So here it is, guys, the 2024-2025 Detroit Lions schedule, courtesy of One Pride Nation on Instagram at onepride.nation, just to give credit where credit is due. A very cool picture and breakdown of the schedule. So we will start right here. And I think first and foremost, what you have to see up front in week 1 and week 2, rematch of your 2023 playoff matchups. Week 1, you're going to face off at home in a Sunday night football game against Matthew Stafford and the LA Rams. What a way to kick off the season. A primetime game against Sunday night football. Ford Field is going to be a rockin'. I can't wait for this one. I think it's going to be a fantastic way to kick off 2024. What a great vibe into week 1. I mean, and great competition. Matthew Stafford is going to be very hungry to come back into Ford Field and try to get a victory against his former team. So I think it's a great way to start off the season against a former foe. I really, truly believe the Lions have a lot of momentum, obviously coming off of the 2023 season. We know the tough loss in the NFC Championship game, but they've had one heck of an offseason so far. We've had plenty of videos talking about the draft, talking about the big contracts that have just been signed. Of course, they've just re-signed Jared Goff to the huge mega contract deal. He's now the highest paid Lion in franchise history. So there's a lot of good momentum heading into this season, and I think kicking it off sort of where you left off is a good way to start 2024. I really do not see the Lions losing a game at home in prime time to kick off the season. So I'm going to mark this as a victory for the Lions in week 1. Then they followed up in week 2, which was their second matchup in the 2023 playoffs, the divisional round against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield coming back into Ford Field, again trying to revenge his loss in the playoffs. So I like the fact that they're starting back-to-back home games. Again, I like the fact that they're starting off against teams that made the playoffs the previous years. You're starting off against good competition to start off the season, but again at home, so you have that momentum. You know, in looking at a win-loss record very early on predictions, I believe that if the Lions win week 1 with the ruckus crowd that will be Ford Field there, I think that momentum carries into week 2. And I honestly think Tampa Bay is a worse team than they were in 2023. I don't think that they added enough pieces. We know the Lions grabbed one of their cornerbacks, Carlton Davis, now playing for us, hopefully starting as CB1. So I really think that the Lions continue the momentum early on in the season and start off 2-0. Now the Lions have their first road game in week 3 as they head west out to Arizona to take on the Cardinals there. Sunday, 4:25 on Fox. In this case, I think, again, the Lions ride some momentum. If I believe the Lions are going 2-0 in 2 home games to start the season, I think you got a lot of positivity as you roll into 2024. The other part of this is, although Arizona is improving, they had one of the worst defenses in the league last year, and I just think with the high-powered offense the Lions will be bringing to Arizona in week 3, they come away with another victory. So the Lions at this point now are 3-0 as they head into week 4. Now we move on to that team that they just cannot seem to beat, the Seattle Seahawks in week 4. They again will come to Ford Field, but the Lions have lost 6 straight matchups against the Seahawks. That number is just burned in my brain. And so this will be kind of prove-it day for the Lions. If I'm telling you that they're going to start 3-0 and have all this positive momentum, then I think they need to carry that into week 4. The problem is Seattle has always had their number, and we're talking another primetime game. This is a Monday Night Football game at Ford Field, and because of that, I am going to give the edge to the Lions. I think 6 losses in a row is tough to overcome, but I think at some point that streak has to break. I think there'll be too much positivity and too much momentum. Monday Night Football, again, will just be too much, I think, for Seattle to overcome. And the Lions start off 4-0 and then they head into that bye week in week 5, which is so early on. I think, any coach and player would tell you that they'd love to have that later on in the season. And the unfortunate part is if the Lions do start 4-0, as I'm predicting here, it kind of kills some momentum. You'd love to see that carry on for several more weeks and then allow them to get rest later on in the season. But it is what it is. They'll have to adjust and move on through the rest of the season. So that then brings us over to week 6, which is a huge rematch going back to Dallas and Jerry World to face the Cowboys there in week 6. This will be a Sunday game of the week situation, 4:25 on Fox. And again, coming off of that weird loss in Dallas before the end of the 2023 season, I think the Lions, will be looking for some revenge. The problem is, I think going to Dallas is always so questionable. The Lions seem to just have some weird things happen anytime they go down and try to play Dallas in their stadium. And at this point, I really think the momentum stops. I think the bye week kind of kills the early start that we've predicted, and this will be the first loss of the season for the Lions at Dallas in week 6. So they will now be at 4-1. The Lions will then stay on the road in week 7, heading to Minnesota. And I think the biggest question there is who is going to play quarterback for Minnesota at that time. And, they drafted J.J. McCarthy, but they have Sam Darnold. So at this point, it's so early on to predict who will be playing quarterback. And even so, I just don't think no matter who it is, it's going to be established or ready to honestly beat this Lions team, even on the road. So I truly believe the Lions go into Minnesota and get a win there and move to 5-1 on the season. Lions then come back home in Week 8 to face their first AFC opponent in the Tennessee Titans. They're going to get quarterback Will Levis in his second season, and they're kind of trying to build up that offense. I don't know that they're going to have enough to keep up with the Lions, especially at Ford Field. I think anytime the Lions play at home either in a den or warm situation, their offense is really going to fire on all cylinders, and I don't think Tennessee keeps up. So the Lions, I believe, get another victory here in Week 8, moving to 6-1 on the season at this point. And we have the first big divisional matchup of the season coming in Week 9. The Lions will head to Green Bay to face what I think will be their biggest foe in the NFC North, the Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love. And this will be, well enough into the season that I think get a good feel for, kind of where they're at. Will the Lions' hot start be enough to get a little separation from Green Bay at this point, or do they keep up? Do they surprise and hold their end of the bargain? So I think this is a huge matchup as the Lions head to Green Bay. And unfortunately, I think this is one of those tough spots. This is a game of the week situation. It's a 425 kick at Lambeau. Although the Lions have had some success there recently, I think their luck finally does run out here in Week 9, and I'm going to mark them a loss here, which will move them to 6-2 on the season. And now in Week 10, we got a really fun matchup. Lions stay on the road, go to Houston to face one of those really rising up-and-coming teams on the other side of the league here. And I think this is a really fantastic matchup. The problem, I think, in this case is you have back-to-back road games. In my opinion, the Lions will be coming off a tough loss in Green Bay. And really in the middle of the season, they spend a lot of time on the road. It's very front and back heavy as far as the Lions being at home, which is great. And we'll talk about that towards the end of the schedule. But right now, they're spending a lot of time on the road. And unfortunately, I think this is one of those tough situations. Another Sunday Night Football primetime game in Houston. That crowd is going to be just going nuts. C.J. Stroud, you have a really, really good defense on that side. And I think enough to maybe hold the Lions down. And this, I think, is going to be kind of the make or break point of the season. I'm going to mark this as a loss for the Lions in Week 10 at Houston. And to me, this is where they either allow these things to start to stack up and become an issue, or they pull out of it as we head farther, kind of at that halfway point of the season. So in Week 11, the Lions finally get to come back home. Friendly confines of Ford Field. They're going to face Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Hard to say where that team's going to be. They were a little bit down last year, but coming off a season prior to that where they really, looked really good. They made the playoffs, got a win. And so it's tough to tell what Jacksonville we're going to get this year. In my opinion, the Lions will be rallying for a win now coming off those two road losses. So I truly believe in Week 11 versus Jacksonville, they kind of right the ship, and this will be a W for the Lions. They will then go to 7-3 on the season. Lions then go back on the road, Week 12 at Indianapolis. I'm going to face Anthony Richardson, who, of course, had injury problems last year, so I don't know kind of where he will be at this point. But I think, again, the Lions start to build back that momentum coming out of those tough losses. They, in my opinion, get a win in Jacksonville a week before, so I think that continues in Week 12, and they get a win against Indianapolis. This will then move them to 8-3 on the season. And, of course, that brings us to Thanksgiving Day, a huge tradition in Detroit, and we will again be facing a divisional opponent. That seems to be a common theme over the last several years, decades. That's kind of getting a little bit old, to be honest with you. But we are playing the Bears, so Thanksgiving Day, primetime matchup. And I think the Lions want to right the wrong that was Thanksgiving last year against Green Bay. So I truly believe that this is kind of, with wins over Jacksonville, Indiana in Week 11 and 12, I think they continue that and get a Thanksgiving Day win against Chicago here in Week 13. This, of course, will be the first time that they get to see Caleb Williams. So depending on where Chicago is at this point, and again, to me, that's the biggest question mark in the NFC North. I think the Packers showed that they're up and coming, but Chicago, with all the changes, added Caleb Williams, all the free agency that they did this year, It's tough to know where they'll be in Week 13. But again, with Thanksgiving Day involved, Ford Field, coming off a loss last year on Turkey Day, I think the Lions are going to want to, again, right that ship. So I think they get a win in Week 13 against Chicago. That would then move them to 9-3 on the season as they head in the final stretch. Another division opponent in Week 14, another primetime Thursday night football game for the Detroit Lions as the Green Bay Packers come into Ford Field. I think the biggest issue in Week 14 is the fact that this will be the third game in 12 days that the Lions will have played. Week 12 at Indianapolis, Week 13, of course, Thanksgiving Day, November 28th, and then on December 5th, Week 14 with Green Bay coming into Ford Field. Third game in 12 days. That is a really hard stretch. We talked about the early bye week, though they don't get the benefit of that. So this will be testing where the Lions' depth is at this point of the season for sure. But I think at this point, the Lions are riding some momentum with wins over Jacksonville, Indianapolis, Chicago, and I think that continues at home on Thursday night, again, the support of Ford Field. So they get a victory in Week 14. This will bring them to 10-3 on the season. The Lions get a third home game in a row in Week 15 when the Buffalo Bills come into Detroit to play the Lions. The nice thing is they do get a 10-day layover following that 3-game stretch we just talked about. So following the Green Bay game, there's a 10-day layover before they play Buffalo. So they'll get a little bit of chance to recoup and hopefully get some guys back and recovered. It's a tough game against Buffalo. Of course, Josh Allen coming into town. The Bills have a pretty good rush defense and a good defense overall. But this will be the third home game in a row. It's a good stretch of games. Although the Lions are playing a lot, they will be at home and have that extra momentum behind them. So again, I think they continue momentum here. I think with 3 home games in a row, this is kind of where the Lions start to separate themselves, in my opinion. So in Week 15, I'm going to give them another win, taking them to 11-3 on the season. And now we're getting towards the Christmas season. The playoff picture is really taking shape. Week 16, the Lions travel to Chicago. I think this is going to be one of the tougher matchups of the season. Overall, I think the Lions' schedule sets up very well as far as them playing indoors and avoiding some of the really cold destinations. But this game is the one in the schedule that really sticks out. Week 16, December 22nd, it's going to be cold at Chicago. Depending on where Chicago's at this point, if they're playing, I think, where people expect them to play, this is going to be a big game. And unfortunately, I think this is one where the Lions lose. I think historically, outdoors in the weather, and although I've argued against that, I just think this is one of those tough spots for them to be in the season. So I'm going to give them a loss at Chicago in Week 16, moving them to 11-4 now on the season, heading into the last 2 weeks. And in Week 17, what I think is the most intriguing matchup, the most special matchup on the Lions' 2024 schedule, they travel back to San Francisco to battle the 49ers in a rematch of the NFC Championship game. We spent so much time talking about why the Lions lost that football game, what the Lions can do to take the next step. Well, this is their opportunity to prove that. Now, a lot of other factors will come into play. We've talked about injuries in general, all the things that can happen. We'll have, the free agency period will be done and gone at this point. So many things will have come into play now. But having this matchup in Week 17 just gives it so many other layers of intrigue, and it could be a very important matchup when it comes to seeding, who could be at top of the NFC. I mean, just so many storylines come into play here. The Lions were a half a football away from getting to the Super Bowl, and they have a chance to revenge it here. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I think you could look at this one of two ways. With the Lions being at 11-4, in my opinion, based on my record predictions, this game may not mean much outside of seeding. So if the Lions don't necessarily need this game, that may play a factor as well. But again, also having to travel to San Francisco, coming off what I think will be a tough loss in Chicago. Unfortunately, I think this may be another tough spot for the Lions. And as much as if we get there, I'm going to be rooting for the opposite result. In my right mind, I'm going to mark this as a loss for the Lions here in Week 17. And that would then bring them to 11-5 on the season heading into the last week of the season. So that last week is against Minnesota yet again in Week 18. This is a game with the date and time to be determined. And, of course, that will all be factored by what happens during the season and can they flex that game. Will this be a divisional matchup that means anything for the NFC North? Will the Lions or another team have wrapped it up at this time? I mean, based on where I have the Lions at 11-5, and I think they continue that with another victory here in Week 18 against Minnesota. It would be at home at Ford Field, so again, you have that backing. That would move the Lions to 12-5, matching their record from 2023. And I think putting them in another position where they are, again, NFC North champions, and I believe competing for a number 1 seed, but I think they're going to be toying probably with a number 2 or 3 seed as they were in 2023. So there it is, the 2024 Detroit Lions schedule in detail, and my very early premature record prediction. I have them at 12-5. I have them winning the NFC North yet again and competing for a number 1 seed, but probably falling more in that 2 or 3 seed spot. And that doesn't mean that they're a worse team or that they hadn't improved things. I just think they have a tougher schedule this year. They're playing more playoff opponents from the previous year than they did last year. So I think it is just tougher overall. They're more hunted than they have been in maybe any era of Lions football. But there are so many positive things. And I think another 12-5 season with another division title and a true shot at the Super Bowl is really where you want to be, and it's got me very excited. But what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. What will the Lions record be in 2024, and what do you think of the schedule? What games are you looking forward to most? I really appreciate all your guys' time on the videos. Thank you so much. If you dig the vibe here at Johnny Gas Sports, make sure to hit the like button on the video, hit the subscription button and notify bell so you don't miss any future videos on the channel. We are officially on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and you can now become a member of Johnny Gas Sports. Don't miss out on any exclusive content as we get closer and closer to the season. I got a lot of good, fun stuff planned. Make sure to take care of yourself and your mental health. That is always number 1. I want to make sure you guys come back and see me on future videos. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to see you very soon.